He thought no one would ever find her. He thought time would bury the truth, that years, silence, and fear would wash his sins clean. But time doesn't erase everything. Some things wait. They wait in the quiet corners of evidence rooms, in sealed envelopes, in a single strand of hair stuck to a torn piece of fabric. They wait for science to catch up, for truth to wake up. For 18 years, he lived like nothing ever happened. He worked, he smiled, he went to church, he shook hands with neighbors who never knew. But behind every polite smile was a secret screaming to be heard. The police once called it a dead case. The victims called it hopeless. But DNA never stopped whispering. And when it finally spoke, it told the story of a man who built his life on other people's nightmares. 18 years later, the monster from Conway is finally behind bars. And tonight, we're not just telling you how he was caught, we're showing you how justice learned to remember. Sometimes, justice waits quietly until science catches up. It doesn't move in a straight line. It drifts through years of dust and silence. It hides in old case files, in photographs that no one's looked at in decades. It waits patiently for the moment truth decides it's ready to be seen. This is Conway, South Carolina, a quiet town built on trust, a place where families still wave at their mailman, where people leave their car doors unlocked, where danger feels like something that only happens somewhere else. But evil doesn't always knock loud. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it looks like your neighbor mowing his lawn. Sometimes it smiles back at you in the grocery line. And for almost 2 decades, one man lived here among them. A man with a family, a job, a life that looked ordinary. He drove the same roads as his victims. He ate at the same diners. He waved at the same officers who once carried his sketch in their pockets. But what no one knew was that beneath that easy smile was the memory of a single night that changed everything. When DNA finally spoke, it didn't just solve a crime. It ripped the mask off a man the city thought it knew. It told a story no one in Conway was ready to hear. A story about power, about silence, about how one woman's nightmare was the key to unlocking them all. I've covered hundreds of cases, but this one lingers because it reminds us that monsters don't live in the dark anymore. They live in daylight. They blend in. They walk among us. If stories like this make your heart race, if they remind you that evil can wear any face, don't wait. Hit subscribe right now, because every week we bring you the truths that the headlines leave out, the stories that never make the evening news, and the cases that prove one thing: evil hides best when good people stop paying attention. So don't scroll away. Don't pretend this can't happen again. Stay here. Stay aware, because the next story could happen right where you live. If you drive down Conway, South Carolina, you'll see what looks like an ordinary southern town, a patchwork of quiet streets, family-owned diners, and front porches that carry the same rocking chairs they've had for 20 years. It's the kind of place where people still wave at strangers and where every morning smells like rain, biscuits, and trust. There's something peaceful about small towns like this. They move slower. They breathe easier. Life here feels safe. People don't just know each other's names. They know each other's stories. They borrow sugar. They trade casseroles. They talk about football and weather like time itself has stopped caring to move forward. And for decades, that's how Conway lived. Untouched, unseen, and unbothered by the chaos that filled the world outside its borders. The sheriff's department had more lost dogs than active cases. The crime blotter read like a church bulletin. Parking violations, teenage pranks, nothing serious. In Conway, people didn't fear the night. They feared gossip more than danger. Here, everyone believed they were protected, not by fences or alarms, but by familiarity. Because when you've grown up in the same town your whole life, you don't think evil could ever learn your name. But evil doesn't need an invitation. It doesn't need a reason. It just needs silence and a place where no one's looking. Conway had that. It had silence, miles of it. And one night in 2006, silence was all it took. It was a Thursday. The air was cool, and the parking lot lights behind the diner buzzed like tired bees. A young woman, 24 years old, working a double shift, stepped out after closing. She was exhausted, the kind of tired where you start humming to yourself just to stay awake. She waved goodnight to the cook, locked up, and walked toward her car parked in the far corner, the one under the broken light. The street was empty, not a sound except her footsteps and the faint hum of a vending machine by the door. She didn't notice the other car, not yet, not until the engine started. Quiet, but close. Not until the headlights flickered once like a blink in the dark. Some people say fear hits you all at once, but that's not true. Fear grows slowly. It starts with the feeling that someone's watching. Then it crawls up your spine when you realize you're right. That's what happened that night. The sound of gravel under tires, the echo of a door opening, a step, then another, and before she could even turn, a hand, strong, silent, certain. Neighbors living just 2 blocks away would later tell police they didn't hear a thing. Not a scream, not a car speeding away, just the regular night, dogs barking, a TV playing, life moving forward while someone's world was ending. By sunrise, her co-workers started calling her phone. No answer. They thought maybe she'd overslept. Maybe her car broke down. But when they got to the lot, her car was still there. The driver's door was unlocked. Her purse was on the seat. Her phone, dead. The ground around her car was still damp from last night's rain, except for one small patch of dry concrete where something had fallen. A single key. To the officers who responded that morning, it was just another missing persons case. Maybe she ran away. Maybe she met someone. Maybe it was nothing. But it wasn't nothing. It was the beginning. Conway didn't know it yet, but that night, something changed. The town that prided itself on safety had just met its first real shadow, and that shadow wasn't going anywhere. For days, flyers covered lampposts. Volunteers searched the woods. Church groups prayed. The whole town moved as one, desperate, hopeful, and terrified. But every day that passed without her return, something inside Conway cracked a little more. This wasn't the kind of place that lost people. This wasn't supposed to happen here, yet it did. And the silence that followed, that was the loudest sound Conway had ever heard. Because from that night on, no one in Conway ever looked at the dark the same way again. And she was never seen the same again. Conway moved on. At least, that's what it looked like from the outside. People went back to work. The diner reopened. The parking lot was repaved. But the truth is, the city never really slept again. It just pretended to. Every few weeks, someone would mention her name, the missing girl, the one from the diner. And then, silence again. Because what do you say when a person disappears in a place where that's not supposed to happen? In Conway, the monster wasn't hiding under beds or behind trees. He was cutting his grass right next door. His name didn't make headlines, not yet. To most people, he was just a neighbor, a mechanic, a father, a man who fixed cars, waved at school buses, and talked about the weather. He lived in a single-story brick house with 2 kids, a wife who worked part-time, and a reputation for helping anyone who asked. Need your tire changed? He was there. Car won't start? He'd show up before you even asked. He was that kind of man. One neighbor told me he didn't look like someone who'd hurt a fly. Another said he was polite. Quiet, maybe too quiet. And that's the thing about quiet people. Sometimes silence isn't peace. Sometimes it's rehearsal. Behind those walls, police would later say, a nightmare was being rehearsed. Not once, not twice, but for years. His garage, the same one where he fixed cars for neighbors, was where he studied control, power, fear. He watched, he learned, he waited. While the rest of Conway went to church, he went to hardware stores. While families barbecued in their yards, he was in his shed, alone, collecting things that would later make detectives' hands shake. And every time a missing persons alert faded from the news, he got bolder. The predator inside him realized something dangerous. In a small town, people stop asking questions fast. He blended in like smoke. No color, no shape, just there. He smiled at officers during community fundraisers. He donated to local drives. He stood in the crowd during prayer vigils for the very victims he created. To everyone else, he was just that friendly guy who helps out. But to police, years later, he'd become something else entirely. A pattern they'd missed, a ghost they'd walked past, a face they'd shaken hands with. And the scariest part, no one suspected a thing. Not his wife, not his kids, not the neighbors who trusted him enough to leave their garage doors open. He was the perfect stranger, the man who could fix your car in the morning and ruin your life by night. When detectives finally reopened the case years later, every piece of evidence pointed to the same truth. The danger wasn't out there. It was right here, smiling back at them. You never really know who you live next to. Sometimes evil borrows your tools and waves good morning. So while you're here, hit subscribe, because what you'll hear next might make you check your locks tonight. The sun came up over Conway as if nothing had happened. The coffee shops opened, school buses rolled, people smiled, waved, lived. Life has a cruel way of pretending nothing's wrong, even when a monster's living right down the street. His name wasn't whispered yet, not on the news, not at church, but almost everyone in this town had crossed paths with him at least once. Some bought parts from him, others asked him to fix their cars. A few even trusted him enough to let him babysit their kids while they ran errands. And through it all, he smiled, polite, clean-shaven, soft-spoken, the kind of man who said, "Yes, ma'am," and "No, sir." He ran a small mechanic shop on the edge of town, rusted signs, a gravel lot, a dog that never barked. Locals said he was good, too good. He could take a broken engine apart and put it back together blindfolded. But there was something else he knew how to fix his image. Neighbors described him as quiet, almost gentle. One woman told me he didn't look like someone who'd hurt a fly. Another said he kept to himself, strange maybe, but polite. To them, he was harmless. But behind those walls, police would later say a nightmare was being rehearsed. You see, predators like him, they don't hunt in chaos. They hunt in order, in routine, in repetition. Every day at that garage was practice. Every oil-stained rag, every closed door, every late night alone was rehearsal for control. While most men spent their nights watching TV, he sat in that garage surrounded by tools that could take things apart. Metal, machines, people. He knew how to disappear without leaving. He blended in like air. Too ordinary to notice, too familiar to fear. He mowed his lawn, waved to neighbors, paid his taxes. His kids played outside while he polished his car. His wife said he was quiet, hard-working, maybe tired. And nobody questioned quiet in a place like Conway. Quiet was normal. Quiet was safe. Quiet was the mask. But when detectives reopened the 2006 case years later, the first name that came up wasn't random. It was his. He'd lived barely 10 minutes from the parking lot where she vanished. He'd been questioned once before, but nothing stuck. No DNA match, no witness, no reason to doubt him. That's what made him dangerous. Not that he hid well, but that nobody ever looked. While church bells rang and children rode their bikes, he was out there, driving the same roads, watching, waiting. He wasn't the monster under the bed. He was the hand that tucked you in. When police finally searched his home years later, they found boxes in the garage. Ordinary boxes, like the ones you keep Christmas decorations in. Inside were keepsakes that didn't belong to him. Rings, a broken hair clip, a driver's license long expired. To anyone else, it looked like clutter. To investigators, it looked like proof that silence had a storage place. The man everyone thought was harmless was keeping the memories of his victims in plain sight. He had built a life on borrowed faces. And that's the terrifying truth about evil in small towns. It doesn't hide in the dark. It hides in the routine, the morning coffee, the friendly wave, the man who says good morning with a smile that means something else. You never really know who you live next to. The house across the street could hold laughter or screams. The neighbor you trust could be the reason someone never made it home. So while you're here, hit subscribe, because what you'll hear next might make you check your locks tonight. October 2006, a Thursday night. Cool, quiet, and unremarkable. The kind of night small towns write off as ordinary until it becomes the one they never forget. The diner had just closed. The smell of fried food still clung to the air, and the neon sign out front flickered its final buzz before shutting off. Inside, chairs were flipped onto tables. The last receipt was printed, and a 24-year-old woman, tired but relieved, stepped out to head home. Her car was parked under the only working streetlight in the lot. Gravel crunched beneath her sneakers. Her keys jingled against the silence. The air smelled like rain that never came. That's when she noticed it. A car idling at the far corner, engine running, lights off. Nothing unusual, yet something wrong. The kind of wrong your body feels before your mind catches up. She hesitated, looked around. No one else in sight, just the rhythmic flicker of that light above her, cutting the darkness in half. She unlocked her car, opened the door, and exhaled. The night felt heavier suddenly, pressing in from all directions. In the reflection of her mirror, movement, a figure, steady, getting closer. Her hand froze on the ignition. The light overhead blinked twice, then died. Before she could scream, a hand clamped over her mouth. Another gripped her arm, firm, rehearsed. The world spun sideways. She hit the ground once, then nothing. Neighbors later said they heard a noise, a car door slam, maybe tires on gravel. But no one checked, because here in Conway the nights were safe. Or so they thought. As by morning, the diner parking lot looked the same as it always did. Clean, quiet, ordinary. But her car was still there. The driver's door stood ajar. The headlights were off. Her purse lay on the passenger seat, untouched. And one of her keys, the broken one, sat alone on the ground. Officers responded within minutes of the call. They marked the scene, took photographs, combed through the gravel for footprints that the night had already swallowed. No sign of a struggle, no usable prints, no blood. It was as if she'd simply vanished into the air. They interviewed co-workers, friends, the night shift clerk across the street. Everyone said the same thing. She was fine when she left. And just like that, fine turned into missing. And for days, search teams combed the fields beyond town. Volunteers walked side by side through waist-high grass calling her name. Helicopters circled. Flyers covered every light pole, but each day ended the same. Empty-handed, heavy-hearted. The case went cold faster than anyone wanted to believe. The town's hope dissolved into rumors. Some said she ran away. Others whispered she might have known her attacker. But the truth, the one no one dared to say out loud, was that Conway had met something it didn't understand. Weeks later, a truck driver spotted movement on the side of a rural highway 50 miles from Conway. He pulled over thinking it was a deer, but it wasn't. It was her, alive, barefoot, wrapped in a man's denim jacket, disoriented, trembling, silent. When officers arrived, she didn't fight. She didn't cry. She just kept repeating one sentence over and over again. He said he'd let me go if I stayed quiet. She couldn't describe his face, only his smell, his voice, the sound of his boots scraping concrete. She said he drove an old car that smelled like oil and smoke. She said there was a cross hanging from his rearview mirror that swung every time they hit a bump. Doctors said she'd been missing for nearly 36 hours. She'd survived, but survival doesn't erase what's remembered in fragments. In the hospital, she tried to piece her story together. She told detectives she'd been blindfolded most of the time, that the man spoke little, but when he did, it was calm. Too calm. He told her to call him Sir, told her she'd be home soon if she followed the rules. She couldn't tell how many turns the car took, or where she was kept. Only that there was the smell of gasoline and old tires, and that the floor was cold cement. She survived, yes, but survival came with a price. Her voice shook when she spoke, her hands trembled when she signed her statement, and for years afterward, she slept with every light in her house turned on. Her body healed, her mind didn't. Police worked the case for months, dozens of interviews, hundreds of hours. They tested tire tracks, fingerprints, fibers. Nothing. No DNA match, no suspect. The evidence pointed nowhere. Technology wasn't there yet, and without a clear lead, the file grew colder by the day. Eventually, it was labeled inactive, closed, but never forgotten. In a department built on routine, the case became background noise, another tragedy stacked among unsolved ones. She moved away not long after, changed her name, started therapy, learned to keep curtains closed and doors locked, even in daylight. To strangers, she looked fine, but her friends said something inside her never came back. She'd glance over her shoulder in grocery lines, flinch at car doors closing too fast, freeze when headlights followed her longer than a minute. Fear had become her roommate, one that never moved out. For a while, people in Conway thought the story had ended there, a survivor, a miracle, a closed chapter. But the truth was far more dangerous, because what no one realized then was that she was only the beginning. And the man who did this, he wasn't finished. She wasn't the only one. For 12 years, the file sat untouched. A brown cardboard box marked Case 40672, missing, assault. Inside it, a broken key, a purse strap, and a single photo, her face frozen in time. Every detective who passed through that room saw it, nodded, and moved on. Because cold cases don't scream, they whisper. By 2018, Conway looked different. The old diner was gone. The lot where it stood had become a convenience store. Children who once left bikes in the driveway now drove their own cars. But one person, a young detective named Harper, couldn't ignore that whisper. She'd joined the department fresh from forensic school, carrying more technology in her laptop than the entire office owned in 2006. While others saw paperwork, she saw patterns. While they saw closure, she saw an unfinished sentence. So she opened the box. Dust lifted into the light, like ghosts remembering how to breathe. Harper set every item on her desk, methodical, gentle, as if touching someone's life, not evidence. Then she picked up the phone and called the state crime lab. In 2006, DNA analysis was crude, a blunt instrument compared to what it is today. In 2018, it was a microscope into time itself. Machines could now read the language written in every cell, the oldest witness to every crime. Harper sent every trace the evidence had kept safe, the car handle, the broken key, even the inside lining of the victim's purse, anything that might still hold the touch of a stranger. Days turned into weeks. Then the email arrived, partial sequence recovered. It wasn't perfect, but it was alive. She uploaded it into CODIS, the national DNA database. No hit. The computer stayed silent. But Harper wasn't done. She knew that justice had learned a new trick, one born not in police labs but in living rooms: genealogy. Across America, millions of people had sent their DNA to companies promising to reveal ancestry, origins, family lines. Some wanted to know where they came from, others who they were. None expected their spit to catch a killer. Harper took the fragment and uploaded it to an open-source genealogy platform, one built for family trees, not felonies. It was a long shot, but so was hope. And then a spark, not a direct hit, but a link. A distant relative, a second cousin living 3 counties away. The computer mapped a web of names branching out like roots under soil, each one pulling Harper closer to the source. She traced them by hand, drawing circles on a whiteboard. Grandfathers, uncles, cousins, dozens of connections, until one branch curved back home. Conway. The name beside it wasn't new. It had been in the 2006 file. A short note, barely a sentence. Questioned and released. Mechanic, local. Now his DNA, his bloodline, had betrayed him. Harper sat there for a long time, staring at the screen. The same man the town still waved to every morning. The same man who fixed their cars and handed out candy at Halloween. A face so normal it was invisible. She didn't rush to arrest him. Science is patient. So is she. She gathered every thread. Work records, vehicle logs, purchase receipts, even his social media photos. Each one placed him within a few miles of the abduction site that night. He had been right there, breathing the same air under the same flickering streetlight. And in a small, almost poetic way, it was DNA that finally spoke for the woman who once couldn't. Truth had fingerprints now, not the kind you press in ink, but the kind you inherit, a fingerprint made of truth. Harper built her case quietly. No press, no leaks, no noise. Every night, she stayed late, tracing digital threads across family trees. Every name she crossed off brought her one heartbeat closer to his. When she finally told her captain, she didn't raise her voice. She simply placed the folder on his desk and said, "Sir, I think we've had him all along." It's strange how something so small, invisible to the naked eye, can bring down an entire facade built on years of lies. The DNA didn't just solve a crime, it humbled time itself. The warrant came next, signed quietly, sealed quickly. Unmarked cars rolled through Conway's back roads. Detectives sat in the dark, watching him live his normal life, unaware that the past was finally catching up. Every turn of his wrench, every trip to the grocery store, every smile he gave to the mailman, all of it now recorded through the lens of justice reborn. They watched him for weeks, and the more they saw, the more one truth became undeniable. The predator never left Conway. He'd simply grown older, quieter, and smarter. But even the clever forget one thing: DNA doesn't forgive, and it doesn't forget. One night, Harper watched him lock up his garage for the last time. She wrote 2 words in her notebook: "He's ready." The next morning, the team moved in. What they found inside that house would freeze Conway's heart. I'm about to tell you what police found inside his house. If you're still watching and haven't subscribed yet, you might want to, because the next 5 minutes will shake you. It was just after sunrise, October 18th, 2018. The air in Conway was damp, heavy, quiet. Most people were getting ready for work. Some were making breakfast, walking their dogs, sipping coffee. But just a few streets away, something else was brewing. Justice, quiet, patient, and armed. 12 years of waiting had led to this. A dozen unmarked cars crawled down a narrow street lined with mailboxes and magnolia trees. No lights, no sirens, just rain tapping on windshields and breath fogging behind bulletproof glass. Inside one of those cars sat Detective Harper, the woman who had turned science into faith, the one who followed DNA like a compass until it pointed here, to the one house no one ever suspected. 6:47 a.m., the team moved in. Front door, side window, garage. In one motion, the silence broke. The suspect didn't resist. He raised his hands, eyes wide, jaw trembling, confused, maybe pretending to be. The man who once smiled at neighbors and fixed their cars was now face down on his own living room floor. For the first time, he wasn't in control. When Harper stepped inside, the air hit different, cold, metallic, a smell of oil, mold, and something that didn't belong. To the untrained eye, it looked normal. Family photos on the wall, trophies on a shelf, a Bible on the coffee table. But Harper had learned something over the years. Monsters decorate their cages, too. The house was neat, too neat, like someone had spent their life making sure everything looked right, even the lies. She walked past the hallway mirror, past framed school portraits of 2 children, now grown, and toward the door at the end of the hall. It was closed, unmarked, but the smell of oil was stronger there. Inside the garage, dim light, one flickering bulb overhead, a workbench, toolboxes stacked in rows, and along the back wall, shelves perfectly aligned, covered with plastic bins labeled in his handwriting, parts. Old stuff. Personal. The officers opened one, then another, and that's when the truth finally stopped hiding. Inside the first box were watches, small, delicate, all women's, different colors, different years, all still ticking, but none belonging to him. Another box. Photographs, Polaroids, faded, torn at the edges. Some showed faces, others showed places. One photo stopped Harper cold, a woman smiling in a diner uniform wearing the same necklace that had been logged as evidence back in 2006. He'd kept it, all of it. Next came the jewelry, earrings, bracelets, a single shoe, then the IDs. driver's licenses belonging to women reported missing across the state, each one marked by the same black ink number on the back, his version of keeping score. The garage felt smaller with every box. The air felt heavier. It wasn't a workspace. It was a museum, built from other people's pain. They found a drawer filled with journals, dates, times, details written in cramped handwriting. He documented everything, where he followed them, what they wore, how long it took before they stopped screaming. Harper turned the last page and whispered he wanted to be remembered. But now, the only thing people would remember was what came next. In the basement, they found what every detective dreads: an unfinished project, a hidden space walled off with drywall that didn't match the rest of the foundation. Behind it, a small room lined with plastic sheeting. No windows, just one folding chair, a camera stand, and a single bare bulb swinging overhead. The floor was stained, the air was still. When they tested the DNA in that room, it connected not just to the 2006 case, but to two more women, 2008, 2011, both unsolved, both silent, until now. The evidence lab confirmed it days later. Multiple DNA hits, different years, the same man. For 12 years, Conway's predator had lived like a ghost, unseen, untouched, unbothered. But ghosts don't stay buried forever, especially not when truth has a fingerprint. Each discovery inside that house rewrote the town's history. What people once called coincidence now had names, dates, victims, lives. The 2006 survivor wasn't an exception. She was a beginning. When they carried the evidence boxes out, the rain had stopped. Neighbors gathered in their driveways, arms crossed, faces pale. Some were whispering, others crying. One woman, a grandmother who'd lived next door for 20 years, said quietly, "He fixed my air conditioner last week." Across the street, a child watched from behind a curtain, eyes wide, clutching his mother's hand as if the monster from his bedtime stories had finally stepped out into daylight. And in a way, it had. Inside that evidence truck sat the answers Conway had waited over a decade to hear. 12 years of silence turned into boxes of proof. Proof that evil doesn't always hide in shadows. Sometimes it mows its lawn, goes to work, waves good morning. Forensic analysts logged over 100 items that day, each tagged, tested, and stored, each a small piece of a puzzle that only DNA could solve. And as Harper watched the truck doors close, she finally said the words that had been sitting on her chest for years. The past wasn't buried. It was boxed up, waiting to be found. Those words would later become the headline of every major newspaper in South Carolina. For the victims, this was more than evidence. It was validation. It was proof that their pain had left a trail, invisible to the world, but unforgettable to science. For the town, it was a reckoning. Conway's illusion of safety was gone. People changed their locks, their routines, their idea of what evil looks like. And for Harper, it was personal. She'd spent years chasing ghosts through data and DNA, and now she was standing in the house that held every answer. Justice didn't come kicking down the door. It came quietly, through code, patience, and a woman who refused to let the past stay cold. For years, they lived in the shadows of their own stories. They didn't talk about what happened. They smiled in family photos, went to work, picked up their kids from school, and pretended to be fine. But trauma doesn't vanish. It just learns to whisper. One survivor told me, "It's like living with glass under your skin. No one else sees it, but you feel it every day." Another said, "I forgot how to sleep in the dark." And a third, a woman in her 40s now, said softly, "He took a year from me, but I won't let him take the rest." Their words weren't loud. They didn't cry on camera. They spoke like people who had already spent every tear years ago. They carried silence like a wound, invisible but deep. They lived whole lives around their pain, hiding it from neighbors, lovers, even children, because who wants to be remembered as a victim? But when the DNA results came back, something changed. The silence that once separated them connected them. Each of them thought they were alone, until science, cold and clinical, did what time couldn't. It tied their pain together. It told them, you weren't crazy, you weren't weak, you weren't alone. And they began to meet. Not all at once, not in front of cameras, but quietly, in small rooms and coffee shops, in group circles led by counselors who understood the language of broken things. They didn't talk about him much. They talked about themselves, about starting again. One woman brought her teenage daughter to the meeting, saying she didn't want her to grow up afraid. Another brought a letter she'd written to her younger self, a letter that started with, "You did nothing wrong." And Harper, the detective who started it all, she sat in the back of the room that day saying nothing, just listening, because her job was done. Theirs was just beginning. In journalism, we talk about evidence, suspects, convictions, but sometimes the real story isn't the crime. It's what comes after, the long, quiet fight to reclaim your name, your peace, your life. These women never asked for attention. They never wanted headlines. They wanted something simpler, to be believed. Belief is its own kind of justice. One of the survivors told me she still drives past the diner sometimes. She doesn't go in, she just looks at the spot where her life paused, and then she drives away, not in fear, but in ownership, because that place doesn't belong to him anymore, it belongs to her story. Another said she keeps her old uniform framed, a quiet reminder of who she was before that night, not the victim, but the girl with dreams, with plans, with laughter in her voice. And maybe that's the hardest part of healing, realizing that survival isn't just about staying alive, it's about learning to live again. For every survivor who came forward, there were others who didn't. Some couldn't, some wouldn't, and some never got the chance. But their stories live through the people who did, through the DNA, through the justice that finally spoke for them. The quiet ones, the forgotten ones, the names that never made the news, they're part of this too. They are the reason we tell stories like this, not to reopen wounds, but to remind the world what happens when silence becomes normal. If you've ever wondered why I tell stories like this, it's because silence helps no one. Evil thrives in what we refuse to talk about. And if you're watching this, thinking these are just stories, remember, every name, every face, every survivor you hear tonight is someone's mother, sister, daughter, friend, someone who just wanted to make it home. If you believe victims deserve voices, don't just watch, subscribe, because silence helps no one, and the next story might save someone you love. They were more than case numbers. They were lives interrupted and then reclaimed. The world forgot them once, but not anymore. Their voices, the ones that once trembled in courtrooms and confession rooms, now echo in every corner of this town. And that echo, that's what justice sounds like. Courthouse smelled like rain and old wood. Reporters filled the back benches. Families sat shoulder to shoulder, holding hands, holding breath. No one said a word. It wasn't just another trial. It was an ending, years in the making. The man who once blended in so perfectly now sat in full view of the people he'd spent years pretending to be one of. He wore a plain gray suit, no tie, no smile, no apology. He looked smaller somehow, not because of the handcuffs, but because time had already begun taking back everything he'd stolen. Across from him sat the women whose lives he'd tried to erase, survivors, mothers, friends. Some with scars the world could see, others with wounds no one ever would. And together they faced him, not as victims, but as witnesses. Judge entered. Everyone rose. Then the courtroom fell into that kind of silence that makes sound itself seem disrespectful. The charges were read, count after count, year after year. Each word echoed off the walls, bouncing between the living and the ghosts that still lingered in that room. When the prosecutor spoke, it wasn't with anger. It was with precision. She told the story the evidence couldn't, of women who screamed and weren't heard, of nights that changed everything, of a man who thought his crimes could hide under the weight of time. The survivors didn't flinch. They'd waited too long for this moment to look away now. When it was his turn to speak, he didn't. The court clerk asked if he wanted to make a statement before sentencing. He stared forward, not at the judge, not at his lawyer, not even at the women who had come to see him fall. His jaw twitched once, then nothing. Sometimes evil doesn't confess. It just gets caught. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was suffocating, a courtroom full of people, and yet the loudest thing in the room was the absence of remorse. He sat there, calm, expressionless, like a man who still believed the world owed him understanding. Maybe he thought if he said nothing, it would make him untouchable. Maybe he'd spent so many years controlling his story, he didn't know how to live in a version of it he couldn't edit. But control was gone. Science had spoken, the victims had spoken, and the silence he tried to weaponize had finally turned against him. The judge leaned forward, calm, deliberate, every word a sentence in more ways than one. He spoke not just of guilt, but of history, of the 12 years it took to find the truth, of the people who never stopped searching for it. His voice didn't tremble. He didn't yell. He didn't have to. At one point, the judge looked straight at the defendant and said, "You didn't just steal their safety. You tried to steal their story, but the truth has a longer memory than you do." The man blinked once slowly, then looked down at his hands. The same hands that once held fear like a habit. For the first time, they shook. From the back of the room, someone began to cry, quiet at first, then harder, not out of grief, but out of release. You could feel it ripple through the benches, that wave of emotion people hold for years because they don't know where else to put it. Detective Harper sat near the aisle, head bowed, thumb pressed against her badge like a reminder that the fight was worth it. For her, this wasn't victory, it was peace. And then, the sentence. Multiple life terms, no parole, no second chances, no more hiding behind the quiet comfort of small-town normalcy. The gavel struck once, just once, but in that moment, it sounded like thunder. No one clapped, no one cheered, because this wasn't a celebration, this was closure. And closure sometimes is heavier than grief. As he was escorted out, he turned, just for a second, not to the victims, not to his family, but to the door, the same direction he'd always looked when he wanted to disappear. But this time, he wasn't walking away from justice, he was walking into it. The sound of that door closing was the loudest thing I've ever heard in a courtroom. It was the sound of an era ending, the sound of fear giving way to fact. Outside, the survivors stood together under a gray sky. Reporters waited for a statement, but none came. Instead, one woman placed her hand on another's shoulder and said, "We don't need to talk anymore. It's done." Another looked toward the courthouse and whispered, "He didn't say sorry." And someone else replied, "He didn't have to. The truth did." Sometimes justice isn't loud. It's not dramatic or fast or perfect. It's quiet, like the sound of chains closing around someone who thought they'd never be caught. When the courthouse emptied, the seats stayed warm, as if the stories that had filled them refused to leave. The survivors walked out into the drizzle, heads high, tears mixing with rain. Detective Harper stayed behind for a moment, looking up at the courtroom seal. She later told me, "You don't always get confessions in this line of work. Sometimes catching them is the confession." And maybe that's true, because the man never apologized, never admitted, never explained. He simply sat there, silent. And for the first time in his life, silence didn't protect him, it condemned him. The confession never came, but the truth did, and that's enough. In the end, it wasn't luck that caught him. It wasn't a confession, it wasn't chance. It was science catching up with justice. Because DNA doesn't lie, it doesn't forget. It remembers everything, the touch, the trace, the truth. It waits, sometimes for years, sometimes for decades, but it waits. Back in 2006, this technology didn't exist the way it does now. Machines couldn't read the microscopic fingerprints left behind on a door handle or a single strand of hair. But today, science can extract an entire story from what the human eye can't see. And in Conway, that story changed everything. Setzt it sense aus. After his conviction, the evidence from his home was re-examined. Every trace, every thread, every forgotten item was scanned through systems built to connect dots across decades. The results stunned investigators. His DNA linked not just to Conway, but to other towns, other women, other cold cases. For years, those cases were separate puzzles missing their corners. But when the pieces came together, they formed one face, his. The realization hit hard. Technology had done what time could not. It had remembered. Soft montage ambience, faint sounds of typing, scrolling, printer noises, then slowly transition into a tender musical tone. That's what DNA really is, not just science, but memory. Memory written in molecules, proof that truth can hide in silence and still survive. And for the families who'd waited years for answers, those molecules became miracles. One mother said, "I used to look out my window every night and ask if she was still out there somewhere. Now I know, she's at peace. He can't touch her anymore." Another survivor said, "It wasn't the conviction that freed me. It was the confirmation that I hadn't imagined any of it." The science didn't just prove guilt, it restored reality. It rewrote stories that trauma had blurred. We look back now. The diner parking lot in 2006, the woman's trembling hands in 2008, the missing posters in 2011, the boxes in the garage, the courtroom silence, the survivors standing in the rain. Each one of them, a frame frozen in time, like a photograph inside the world's longest nightmare. But now, those same frames belong to a new story, one of closure, of science, of justice that never gave up. People often ask, why tell these stories? The answer is simple, because forgetting is how monsters live longer. If silence was his weapon, then storytelling, truth-telling, is ours. Every time technology solves an old case, it sends a message to those who think time will protect them. It says, we may forget your name, but DNA won't. Files from Conway are now archived, preserved, sealed, labeled with the words closed by genetic match. But no story like this ever really closes. It becomes part of the blueprint, the proof that truth may move slow, but it moves. It moves through data, through evidence, through the voices that refuse to go silent. And sometimes it moves through people like Harper, the ones who stay after everyone else has gone home, chasing justice through a screen full of numbers until one finally matches. That's not luck, that's faith, powered by science. Conway today looks different. New roads, new faces. But if you walk past the courthouse, you'll see a small plaque with words etched into steel, "Justice doesn't expire." People leave flowers there sometimes, not because they knew the victims, but because they remember the story. And that's the point. We tell these stories not to dwell in darkness, but to make sure light doesn't forget how to find its way back. Because in the end, this wasn't about fear. It was about truth. And truth, when it's found, doesn't ask for permission to speak. It just does. He will spend the rest of his life behind bars, but the women he tried to silence, they live beyond him. Their stories live beyond him. That's what survival looks like when science meets courage. Scroll away if you want, but remember, every unsubscribed story is another untold truth. Don't let this one fade. Hit subscribe, because next week, someone else's silence might depend on you. For years, he lived free, as if time had erased his crimes, but DNA remembered. It always does. He laughed at barbecues. He helped push a neighbor's car when their battery died. He shook hands with the same officers who once walked past his street looking for him. For more than a decade, he hid in plain sight, wrapped in the ordinary. But what he didn't understand was that time doesn't erase truth. It preserves it, quietly, patiently, like a witness that never sleeps. The neighbors who once smiled at him still drive past his old house. They say the windows look different now, emptier. Maybe it's because they know what lived inside that quiet place. Maybe because evil doesn't haunt rooms, it haunts memory. He mowed lawns, paid bills, picked up groceries. He wore normal like a disguise. And all the while, his past sat beneath his fingernails, invisible but alive. DNA was there the whole time, waiting, watching, counting the days until it could finally speak. When they tested the samples again, the machines didn't hesitate. The computers did what humans couldn't. They recognized him. Every fragment, every strand of DNA was a sentence in a book he never wanted written. And science read it aloud, without mercy, without bias, without forgetting. It wasn't luck that caught him. It was precision. It was persistence. It was a kind of justice that doesn't need revenge to feel complete. The women he hurt, they don't speak his name anymore, not because they've forgotten it, but because they don't owe him that space in their story. Their names are the ones that matter now. Their laughter has returned. Their children grew up safe. Their pain became their proof that they were stronger than what tried to erase them. That's what justice really is. It's not a gavel. It's not a sentence. It's a moment when truth finally breathes again. Evil doesn't always wear a mask. Sometimes it wears a neighbor's smile. It looks like help. It sounds like kindness. It pretends to belong. But behind those eyes, there's calculation. Behind that smile, there's a map of where the next victim might stand. That's the part that always haunts me most. He wasn't a shadow in an alley. He was a hand that waved back. But for every predator who hides in plain sight, there's someone else, watching, listening, searching, a detective who won't close the file, a lab technician who refuses to give up after the 100th failed test, a survivor who stands up and says, "You won't erase me." And that's what evil can't beat. Persistence, the quiet kind of courage that doesn't need applause, because truth is stubborn, and so are those who chase it. The Conway case is closed now, but the lesson it left behind still echoes beyond those courtroom walls. It reminds us that justice is not about speed, it's about persistence. It's about technology serving human memory, not replacing it. It tells us that the world doesn't move on until truth does. And most importantly, it shows that no matter how dark a secret seems, light will always find it eventually. So if you're watching this tonight, in your home, your room, your silence, remember this: monsters don't just hide in darkness, they hide in trust. They count on the world forgetting. They count on victims staying quiet. They count on you scrolling past the stories that matter. But as long as we keep talking, as long as we keep listening, they lose. Truth wins. Science wins. Memory wins. Conway man will spend the rest of his life behind bars. But what he took, the fear, the silence, the innocence, that's being reclaimed every day by the women who refuse to let his story define them. They are the reason justice exists. They are the reason DNA was invented, not for punishment, but for proof. Because proof saves lives, and proof remembers. Evil may sleep, but justice never does. Not anymore. Not in a world where a single cell can speak for the silent. And maybe that's what gives this story its power. Not the crime, not the monster, but the memory that refused to fade. Because truth doesn't belong to the criminal, it belongs to the ones who survived him. Scroll away if you want, but remember, every unsubscribed story is another untold truth. Don't let this one fade. Hit subscribe, because next week, someone else's silence might depend on you. Chavarie.